adopt a deed restriction at some point in the future, but I mean, this one is particular to this.
I have no problem restraining myself to preserve the building. That's why I'm asking the question to the board. It is a policy decision.
It's all, yep, you can do whatever you want.
Can I call a question on the vote?
I was going to ask if I could have just a friendly amendment, linking about my concern with section 5 and looking at with maybe adding redirection there to make it clear that a failure of parties to agree in section 5 caused the process in section 2 to be followed. Sorry, it's really wordy.
And the words, I'm sorry, can you repeat?
With direction to Attorney Bayer to make clear that if the parties do not agree in section 5, the section 2 process will be followed.
Okay, I'll accept that amendment. Okay, I'll call the question.
So we have to call the question. So this will be an immediate vote on calling the question, if you want to call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll now take up the motion. Sarah.
Okay. To approve the declaration of deed restriction with the amended suggestions made by Ms. Reddick to forward to the North Shore Fire Department Board for approval pursuant to the memorandum of understanding for the renovation of the Shorewood Station number 83.
Can I make a friendly amendment? I'm sorry, we called the question, but Ms. Brederick should, I don't believe should really be in the motion when someone was back on it. It should stay as it was. All right, so.
That would include the friendly.
No, that doesn't also
Trustee Moore.
trustee Warren. So did the,
And contingent upon the real estate closing of the subject property, and with the direction of Attorney Baird, make the affiliated clear that if the parties do not agree in section 5.
So it was with direction to Attorney Bayer to make clear that if the parties do not agree in section 5, the section 2 process will be followed.
And the addition of the wording, Shorewood Design Review Board or other entity, or something like that. I don't know what you said. Trustee Barrett. I mean, Attorney Barrett. Get your settlement way down.
If the board prefers to have the specific items in the motion, I did take pretty copious notes, and I can help clerk at those later if you prefer.
Perfect.
I have number 2, red brick, step pattern, cable accidents, and then I have also brick coursing, and then with respect to 13, I have the notes on the limestone, keystone, sills, and accents that I can help the clerk add. If you would prefer to have that rather than the reference.
I mean, I have those notes. Okay, just add them. It was made with permission. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries
all right.
7-0. Okay. And did you need anything else for the easements, or?
I don't think, unless anyone had any concerns on them, like I said, when the property is subdivided, then we have to go back and then change, finalize some things that we can't do until it's subdivided. So it's helpful that they also take action on the CSM, or you want to wait until you see what change.
So,
our motion only included the deed restriction.
Right.
We already have another motion
So
for the CSM.
thank you. And my only question in City Planning Commission when we had it there was, where on the CSM does it, usually you list your easements, so you know right away the physical easements. I remember that was your response. Can you list the deed restriction too, so that it's very clear of all the restrictions on that property?
On the CSM, is that the question?
Yeah, like where else do you find it? Just on a property report?
I don't think it would go in the CSM.
Okay, where does it show up is all I'm asking.
It'll be filed with the registrar's office, so that anybody that does a search on that property, a deed search or any kind of search, it'll pop up.
It'll pop up
It'll
property
pop up
search.
with the deed. It'll pop up with the easements as well. The deed restriction will pop up with that, so it's a way that anybody that's looking at that property in the future, they'll look and say, okay, it's going to come subject to this deed restriction and these easements.
Okay.
I'll move to approve the CSM as with proposed changes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much. Is that all for that item? Okay. Motion, is that right? Was that one, did we put in that 1 foot variation? What exactly is that?
It was a reference to the
Okay, it did. Okay, sorry. This is the right place. All right, thank you so much, Chief. I'll see you soon.
Yep.
The next item of business is also a special order business to review the long-range financial plan. And it's not for action. Do we already take action on it? That was not listed for action. Did we take action? Should we adopt it?
I don't have a clear recollection of what past practices may have been, but if you choose to do so, you may. I mean, we didn't agenda it, but we can bring that back as another agenda item.
I would like to know that we sign off on it every year. I don't know if we start that next year. It doesn't matter to me necessarily, but it does make sense that we would adopt our financial plan.
Absolutely. I mean, we can bring back some language to do that if you'd like.
All right. Mark, are you here? for
I am here.
presentation? All right.
I think the best course of action before we get into all the financial projection schedules is to take a refreshed look at the underlying infrastructure project plan and make sure that there's any other questions that remain to be addressed. So I've given a big print copy of that for all the trustees.
For our old eye.
And this is the outcome of the meetings we had earlier in the year and how to try to best set a project schedule that achieves the goals and objectives that we've heard.
Does anyone have any questions? I do, but I will wait. Trustee Mehta.
The $3,025,000 for local roads is the Larkin Newhall project. Okay. The only question I had was Oakland Avenue seems to be out in 2028, and that looks like full reconstruction. And I thought we discussed having some interim patching happen earlier.
We did, and to be very candid, we are still working on a process or procedure of how that could be effectively and economically done. So we elected to schedule it for reconstruction at the earliest opportunity, and we will continue to explore other opportunities and methods for doing or for addressing things in the near term.
Is it going to
It would
last?
be great to have, some, even if we don't know the exact amount. I mean, since this is a plan, really, it'd be nice to have something. I mean, I know we can't change it now, but, or maybe we can, I don't know, but, I mean, it would be nice to allocate, something in, because we can't wait till 2028. I mean, there's no way for 9 more years on that road, especially south. I mean, it's a huge problem.
I fully agree. It's built in, what was it, 70? What was the last time it was built? It's like the oldest section, not very nice. And it has a very low rating too, right? The south section. South Chicago.
The pavement certainly is not in, the condition that we would like it to be, but as we've discussed before, given its concrete construction and its heavy traffic load, those present some pretty big challenges in terms of how you do it in small segments. We are going to be replacing some panels this year with the operating budget money allocated. That will give us some indication of
the feasibility, what we expect to be the efficiency, the successfulness, and the cost of doing it this way. I fully expect that we can have a much more comprehensive solution and better answers for you next year. But until we really get into attempting to replace scattered panels and really determine how that impacts traffic, and what kind of prices we're going to get for that type of work, it's very difficult to be able to give you any sort of, numbers that I feel good about and comfortable with.
We have like dry.
That's an asphalt pavement section, this is concrete.
Concrete. Oh, Capital? Do we do Capital? What's the other concrete road we have, Capital?
Capital Drive, but that was reconstructed in its entirety. That is not what we're proposing to do here in the interim, so it's a very different construction process.
Just one.
Thank you, Lynn. I appreciate your perspective on this. Maybe it's worth, since this is our official document that comprehensively outlines the capital projects. I mean, this isn't the optimal solution, but I think we want to memorialize the fact that we're looking at this. So we're trying to figure out a way. I appreciate that we haven't been able to list 2028, 2029, but maybe we can put somewhere as an asterisk or in the write-up that we're looking at Oakland and trying to figure out kind of interim solutions. So, at least it's memorialized and we can put it down on paper.
Because, and thank you for that suggestion, because in the past, it looked like this, we weren't looking at it, right? So now we're looking at it and we should just memorialize this. Trustee Meyer? I have two questions. So the sidewalk program costs, we had adopted new standards, so is that going to cover, with the new standards and the evaluation, will that amount cover the needed work? We lowered our standards or changed them so that we have less would qualify?
I believe that the amount listed will cover the work that will be identified with the current standards.
With the new standards. Okay, thank you. And then I just want to make it known for anyone that's watching or for the public, I do oppose that Wilson Drive, the money got taken out for phase 2. I still think that there is stuff identified on the original spreadsheet that we should look into, whether it be 5 years from now or 8 years from now, but it's there, and I don't like the fact that we dropped it, but that's my own personal opinion, so I want to point that out. And can you explain just quickly, Mark, manhole replacements? I remember seeing that somewhere when we get done with like lateral or whatever it is, and we look at manholes replacements.
Well, within the sewer budget, it has some capital projects funded by the sewer utility.
It was an audit or something. Okay.
So those are scheduled right now to be self-funded as more of a capital maintenance project than funded through bond or borrowed proceeds. So.
Okay. And then, but they don't show up. They're just like miscellaneous. Is what you're saying?
Well, again, the long-range plan is designed to emphasize debt finance projects, and those would not be debt finance, so they're not on the schedule.
Oh, I see. So these are like revenue bonds. That's debt.
No, they would be funded from cash reserves within the sewer utility.
Oh, so not bonds. Okay.
Correct.
And then two other questions quickly. I don't remember if it was an email, but something about Edgewood and the sewer design, and they changed it a little bit, MMSD. Is that factored into here anywhere, or does it have to be?
That cost would not be a village cost.
Okay.
The change in the scope of the project is an MMSD borne cost.
Okay, so it's nothing like local roads or anything like that. And then local road program, it's in 10 years we go, and I understand that we're doing the sewer system, but just for the public to understand, 10 years without any other, without a local road program is going to, I believe, will put us slightly behind in our efforts to maintain, which started back when Chris was here. Like, we need to have a cycle so that we don't let the roads go into disrepair before we start improving. Will that have any effect? 10 years is a long time.
You flip to the second page, you'll see local road. There is a local road program. It's simply packaged with the anticipated sewer improvements.
Oh,
Trustee Amenta?
On the water capital projects on the first page, are those on the levy or are they revenue bonds?
Those will be general obligation bonds.
Trustee Maher?
it's on item 13, future facilities, Village Hall. Is that just a placeholder for?
Yeah, that was one of the items, again, trying to build on the premise that we should try to anticipate expenditures, even if we haven't identified what they may be. That we should have some placeholder representation in there. So that was added along, as well as line 12 for the contemplation of replacing the HVAC system at the village center.
Okay.
I know the police stuff is in here, right? So police, phase 2?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Trustee Amenta?
The street lighting boxes, wasn't there something in the mid-year review about street lighting boxes and having to postpone them because of LED? Is that what it was?
We asked Strand to provide an analysis before we go any further as to whether the replacement streetlight box components would be compatible with the future LED system. I expect to have that report within the next week or so. And then we will do a little more of a detailed dive into what that means and how we make those plans. And then I don't know that Rebecca and I have exactly talked timeline on this, but I would expect prior to the end of the year, we will come back to you with some sort of a discussion about direction related to future LED planning.
So we're not going to do the project this year, but we're figuring out and we're planning to do them next year.
If that report says with confidence that the components that we would use in the cabinets to power the existing system would be compatible with a future LED system, then we would go ahead because the money is available.
Okay.
If that report says, you might want to think about a few things before you do that, then we would come back to you and say, these are the things that we need to think about and talk about, and what's your direction?
Okay.
Can I ask why, I just don't remember, alley and sidewalk programs stop between years of 2022 and 2023 and then double up in the following year?
Because 2022, if you flip the page, and 2023 are very significant sewer projects, and we would not have staff capacity to do anything other than that project.
And is that something that you were mentioning when we're getting into budget? There was timing issues, this is one of the things. Capacity. Was this changed from prior versions, or was this always like this?
No,
This is an update based on our last meeting with the board, or with the
Based on our,
call.
Based on our, yeah, okay. Or some on my paper, okay. Anybody else? Do we need to put small capital projects? I can't remember, like, I thought the board voted on the review, or maybe that was just a priority for the launch.
That was an initiative.
It was an initiative.
Yeah, so not within the scope of this plan.
Does it go into this plan, is all, like,
What's the question?
eventually, like, smaller capital like that?
Well, there is a section that entails the annually funded capital projects in the plan, and we can get to that on the review of the schedules in the plan, too, if that's all right.
Okay, I just, when we talk about capital planning, I know that I've seen smaller ones, like cover parking lot, or some of the smaller ones, and just where they end up.
I think this reflects everything that we talked about today, and my understanding is the purpose for tonight is to show us what's been updated based on all of our discussion.
Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you so much, Mark. And
He
we'll
was
just
gonna
get,
talk about the.
oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So that's the project schedule.
All right.
All right. Now, should I moved out while you could.
You know, I should have seen some of
I'm gonna let you off the hook, Clay, yeah.
Oh.
As always, staff tries to continually improve these documents based on feedback and discussion from previous cycles, and there's been a few updates in the way these schedules are presented, a little closer language with some of the narratives in the document. So I'm just going to go page by page, and we can kind of go from there. I've got notes because this is a lot of material, so on page 3, your basic overview that this is a 10-year plan to help illustrate and put into context the fiscal impact and outlook for the village given the numerous capital initiatives that are identified in the project schedule. The project schedule is for projects that aren't funded through annual revenue sources. And again, it's a 100-foot view, so it's always under revision and updates and refinement, which is why we do this each year. We can continue to update the information, take into consideration changing situations within the community and within those board priorities. This project schedule is not intended to project budget amounts for the 10 years within the plan, but to just illustrate the general fiscal resources that would be required to accomplish the identified capital objectives as proposed within the plan within the following context. The tax levy funded debt service requirements that would be necessary to implement the plan. Debt capacity impacts under state law and in compliance with municipal policies. The ability to implement this plan within the state levy limits and the impact that some of these projects may have on future utility needs. So that's kind of the global summary here of what this plan tries to address in some of these schedules and presentation comments. Page 4 then gets into that first aspect, talks about debt service.
Can I just make one comment on page 3? I think 50 million is an appropriate amount over a 10-year period. So I know it's a big number, but I just wanted to, I've been watching it the last 4 years, and I think that's a good amount.
Very good. So the schedule here starts line 1 on the numeric table is the village's current existing tax levy supported debt. Then we, based on project plan and project schedule, we project what the future tax levy supported debt is going to need to implement those projects. I increase the total debt service that would need to be supported by tax levy. Lines 4 and 5 show some year-to-year changes. Line 6 is an indicator of quantified, again, from previous discussions, what is that per household. If we use our $300,000 household as a benchmark. Then below the line, we start getting into line 7, which is the stabilization baseline. Back in 2016, staff introduced the concept that because of a dramatic increase in debt service in 2017, that it may be prudent to try to supplement the tax levy with general fund reserves to manage the increase in tax levy for debt service from year to year to a 5% limit. So that's where the concept of the stabilized debt services is to manage that big jump from 2016 to 2017, and no doubt that those, once at that higher level, that continues over the next several years. So we take up the step up and we try to slope that off with stabilization over the next 5 or 6, 7 years. So that's the baseline calculations. Line 8 shows the amount of stabilization support that would be needed from general fund reserves to achieve that 5% year-over-year increase. Lines 9 and 10 talk about the balances that were currently available. In projected 2019, the board's direction in previous years was to program 75% of the unassigned fund balance in excess of 30% for debt service stabilization. So that's where the $540,000 starting point comes from.
Over the 30%. I don't remember that 75%. I always thought it was to hold it at 5% of our operating budget. The amount that we would budget for stabilization.
Well, the funds that would be utilized out of the general fund reserves were designated to be 75% of the unassigned balance in excess of the required 30% of reserves under the village policies.
Okay. Is there another policy that says 5% of the operating budget? The debt service should not go above 5%, and then you subsidize the rest so it stays at that 5% of the operating?
I don't believe that was ever crafted into a policy statement, more of a fiscal management tool that we've been proceeding with for the last couple of years.
That's not how we get this number. How much we're going to utilize to stabilize debt service. I thought it was like once it reaches 5%.
That's line 8.
That's line 8.
It's like 8, okay. Okay,
So that's-
trustee.
Go ahead.
I just have a question about finding the stabilization. So in 2020, 2029, there is no numerical value when it goes to?
Well, it runs out in
Is
2024.
that was my question. So do we run out of the ability to stabilize that 5%
Well,
baseline?
if you're looking at line 8, you'll see that in 2027, it drops to 109,000 from the previous year, which is 364. After that, the natural debt service needs will not exceed that amount. So there would be no stabilization needed to be within that 5% target. Because the debt service on line 3 actually starts to drop off at that point. We're over the funding hump for debt service.
So even though that in 2029, the 5% baseline is 2.7 million, which is,
But that's less than 5% increase from 2022.
got it.
And
Okay.
if you look on line 5, you'll see that the debt service starts decreasing out in those years.
Yeah.
So that's when the stabilization program, according to this schedule, would be completed.
2027 would be last year, is what you're saying.
That's correct.
And so,
Assuming we make no changes in the plan and all the interest rates and bids and all
so
that
what
stuff.
is number 12? We run out of available funds in 2024.
That is correct.
So I don't understand the difference between what she just asked and, so if we run out of available funds to stabilize, maybe I'm talking about the 75%, how, in 2024, how do we continue on?
Well, this plan does not take into consideration any budgetary surpluses, any other external revenue sources that may be available. It does take into consideration repayment of general fund advances to the water and sewer utility. And it does take into consideration in 2022 the disbursement of residual TID 1 incremental revenues to the taxing jurisdiction. So we're going to have to take a look at that and see each year how that benchmark number that we start with and then keep going on. But
I think I understand. So tax levy debt service stabilization is the 5%. So you never want your debt service payments to be over 5% of your operating budget, and therefore we subsidize. And then that runs out to 2028, we don't need anymore. And then if you go down, funds available for tax levy stabilization, that's a different thing than debt service stabilization. And those funds run out in 2024. There must be a policy that dictates what that is, and that's the 75%.
again, the line 7, the stabilization baseline, It's not of the whole budget, but it's just a year-over-year tax levy increase. So you compare that to the total debt service needs projected on line 3, and line 8 is line 3 minus line 7. So that's the additional funding you would need to be able to proceed with only a 5% increase in the tax levy for debt service year to year to year. It's not in relation to the
Different
operating
than the
budget.
next thing, number 9, are funds available for tax levy stabilization,
Yes.
but the same amounts, you're using the same amounts.
Well, it's a running balance, lines 9 through 12. So you have to have a starting balance, you have to subtract out then your needs going forward on line 10, add in anything that's reasonably certain on line 11, and that kind of gives you that running balance. And again, right now, with reasonably certain items, without being speculative, that the ability to maintain that would end in 2024.
And which means what would be our alternatives when that happens? I ask this every year, but I believe you said we can hire,
Well, we can increase the target.
okay?
We can not limit the general fund unassigned balance to only 75% of the available balance, because there's another couple $100,000 that are held back with that as well. And keep in mind, I mean, the board just committed $100,000 of fund balance to support the private lateral replacement program. So, I mean, these numbers need to be refreshed every year, but for right now, as things stand, we're good on that through 2024. And again, these are big numbers with a lot of variables. And when it really gets down to being a couple years out, I think it's about the time that we would say, do we want to adapt a different strategy, or,
It's 5 years out.
no,
I don't
it's
know.
be a couple years.
2 years, I don't,
I understand. And the board can give new direction to staff as well.
last year, I wanted to review those policies and staff did not. So this year, assuming during budget, is this the time to review them? I can wait till next year. When's the time to review those?
I don't know, but I feel like we're going outside the,
Well, they're in the long range plan, right?
I mean, I don't want to argue with you, but it just seems like this conversation is extended.
Well, I mean, the decision obviously
What decision?
is to determine to levy more for debt service on property taxes in any budget cycle. And that changes the baseline from which we go in future years.
Or utilize that extra 5% instead of holding back the 25, go to.
In a future year, yeah, absolutely,
So we'll look at it next year.
absolutely. I mean, that's something I keep a close eye on too, because, you know, what we're trying to avoid from 2016 to 2017 was a big bump. And we see we can make it to 2024, 2025, but if that time comes and we don't have a plan to get through to 2027,
A million, I mean, it's big.
so
I mean, we could say we're gonna raise the levy, 0.25, and put it specifically towards this, so we could do a small
Right.
levy increase to add to the debt service stabilization fund
Absolutely.
to smooth it out more, but we'd be saying we're not gonna be at 1% or under 1%. We're
Right,
gonna
but
be
better
at
than
2 or
5 years from now,
one and
coming
a
up with
quarter,
a
or 1.5
million.
or whatever. And then we could decide a budget. We don't want to fall off a cliff in 2024. We want to start, letting a little bit extra now to have that cushion so we can get all the way out to 2028.
So it sounds like the time, it would be in a budget cycle.
I can certainly bring this up for additional discussion during the budget
That would be fabulous. I
discussion.
didn't know if you were going to cut me off. The reason I asked the question here is because it's in the long range plan and sometimes we
Again,
get
this
budget, it's too late.
This is to reflect where we stand relative to that benchmark. That's all that does. I will make sure we bring that discussion up during the budget process, and I can give perhaps some additional illustrations on that. Without any other questions, just one other note I have for myself. Well, TID 1 closure is built into this because we've gotten to a point where I can be reasonably certain what those numbers are going to be within a certain range. The prospective TID 5 closure in 2024 and the funds distribution from that is not included in here. There's a couple more moving pieces to that discussion, as you might imagine. But as that starts being resolved and projections become more reliable, looking out, and we can always look to see if those funds would be available to supplement this need as well, if that's how the board wants to use those funds. Then on page 5 is my easiest page. Here's the chart of the percentage of the village's equalized debt. Under state statute, we're limited to 5% of equalized value. Right now, we're just over 3%. Well, in 2019, we're going to be just under 3%. I'm just looking at the lines from the chart. 2019 on page 5. Left-hand side is the percentage of equalized value, and then the projected debt service needs through 2030 are displayed. The blue line, the bottom section, is the general government debt, which seems to be stabilizing below 1.5%. We do have some ongoing utility general obligation debt anticipated, largely due to the water utility projects, until the water utility can be in a financial position to contemplate issuing its own revenue bonds, and that is going to be several years from now. And then the green portion is the full-term rundown of the TID debt. I have adjusted for TID 1 closure, but not prospective closures of the other TID districts at this point. So
that decline is basically TID 1 getting closed out?
Part of that in 2021,
Okay.
and the rest of that is just the natural existing schedules. Page 6 is some narrative, talks about levy limits, and again, I tried to incorporate a little more reference to the schedule with what I would normally be giving just in front of the board, so that in the document you can refer to that instead of trying to recall what I might have said in August of last year or that. So page 7 is basically your levy limit projections. Using the model that we traditionally use for the plan, which is a baseline, what if there was a 2% increase in tax levy for operations and capital, what would that do to our levy limit capacity? And
So this is based on the 2% increase every year in our tax levy? Or tax
for
levy?
operations and capital, yes. Because debt service is exempt from our levy limit requirement. So
2% increase.
line 6 is basically our subtotal levy limit. If you look in year 2020, it starts out with our line 1's our prior year levy limit. Line 4 is an adjustment for the deduction we took for debt service. And that gets to our new baseline on line 5 for our levy limit. We are allowed to increase the levy under state statute by net new construction, which for 2020 will be 0.8%. Ironically, the same as it was in 2019. It's not a typo, though those are the actual numbers.
Growth with what? Development, new construction?
Net new construction.
Is that for the mosaic closing out, or?
Well, it's part of the mosaic, part of the Oaks, and then part of that is just general structural improvements in the community. So as far as the, line 7 then calculates what our anticipated new allowable levy limit will be.
Mark,
Yeah.
for the growth factor, I see it in the text that you cut it off, but can I just ask, what is the, so you did the mosaic, the oaks, some of the bigger ones, but then the general new, you just said in general, is that like a 1%? Is that a 2.02? Like, what are you using for just general growth in 2020? And can we factor that in?
2020 is an actual number. I've got the assessed.
This is not the big ones, it's just your general, I'm just trying to figure out why everything is 0, when there might be some smaller.
Right, we're not going to project hypothetical net new construction.
There's not a standard that we see, like a baseline that we see over and over.
Well, as you might imagine, there's been a lot of significant projects in the community in the last 10 years or so, but the background tends to be about 0.2%.
So I was asking, thank you.
So if that kind of answers your question. And so there's definitely going to be some net new construction, we hope. But we're not going to project that.
Okay.
Again, this is supposed to be fairly conservative modeling. So once you have your adjusted levy limit on line 7 for year 2020, and then we're allowed to levy for our debt service in addition to that. And that gives us to line 9, which is our maximum allowable levy limit for 2020. But we don't anticipate going anywhere near that amount. We're modeling based on line 10, which in 2020 is, again, it's a model, $11.9 million, which shows that on line 11 we have a reserve levy limit capacity of almost $1.7 million. Now the reason that we have that is because due to all these various construction projects over the last 10 years and the village's tax levy coming in below those net new construction numbers, plus with guidance from financial advisors, we've only claimed our debt service deductions in previous years to the extent we need to meet our levy. So we've got that kind of built up preservation of that capacity.
They let you carry it over, the capacity?
It's not truly a carryover because we never claimed it. But the difference between what our real debt service is and what we need to claim would get us all the way up there if we needed to. So this chart then looks forward years on line 11, and again, assuming that we have no net new construction, operating and capital increase at 2%, how long does that additional levy capacity last?
And when you say operational levy, is that, I know police and fire salaries, is it all salaries, just 2% across the board?
It's pretty much everything except debt service.
Okay.
All tax levy except debt service is another way to say that. So this plan shows that under those conditions, we would still have available levy limit capacity going through 2029. And again, every year we're going to have some net new construction. We're going to recal. We're going to relook at our debt calibration based on the plan that's evaluated next year and the year after that, and again continually churn these numbers and update them.
Trustee Warren.
So Mark, what you're saying is the 1.8% of room that I see in 2029, that's a very conservative estimate given the fact that we're going to have some net new construction. The levy limit will be larger than we think it will be. In other words, we won't be that close to our top end number. We're likely to.
If we are exactly 2% increase for operations and capital, and we have any net new construction above 0, that would be correct.
Okay.
If we're below 2% increase for tax levy for operations and capital, then that number will inherently grow because we didn't use that benchmark against the moderate levy, just used for the planning.
So gross spending less than the
So,
Mark, can I ask one more question? Going into budget, I saw your budget memo in the packet, and it always talks about diversifying our revenues. And I assume you want to diversify our revenues because we don't want to hit our levy limit like other communities. If that's not true, if we still have this cushion, what is the motivation to diversify like take things off of the tax roll and put it into a new garbage utility? Or, some of the things that were mentioned last year as we're going forward. Why do we want to diversify our revenue?
Well, the more diversified your revenue base is, the less you have to rely on the tax levy in any given year to support your operational needs.
So it's not based on a concern for reaching your levy limit?
No, it's not.
Okay, thank you.
So that's kind of the gist for this. And again, please, if you have any follow-up questions, I'm always available during the week. Give me a call, stop by, and get into some nuances or what is, anything that may come up either tonight or after the fact.
I just want to say I appreciate having the TID forecasts included in the long-range management.
Thank you very much.
It consolidates.
Can do.
Yeah.
A quick, are you moving on or are we done with it?
Can you tell me?
I just have the question on the next page, that's why I'm asking.
Page 8? You go page 8 if we're all ready to go for that?
Oh, thank you.
Is that true?
Yeah.
I'd like to end the meeting at, a
That's
reasonable
fine.
hour.
I just have one question, and if anyone else has questions, we don't have to go through the rest of the packet, maybe we can just ask and go around once. The tax rate that it says here changed from prior year, some of them say like 4.1, line 16. Like assumption of 2020, our tax rate would increase by 4.1. That's built into these forecasts, correct?
That's built into the model. Primary reason for that is the restoration of the capital funds that were reduced from last year's capital budget. So we need to at least model the preservation of those funds for capital equipment replacement by and large. So that's just a starting point.
That our net going into budget, you're projecting 4.1, correct? Is that
And based on the model of restoring what we've identified as about $725,000 baseline of annual funding needed to maintain those projects and efforts funded through annual funds, that would result in that increase in 2020.
okay, thank you. Anybody else have, we can go around if anyone has questions for the remainder of the document? If not, we can move on to the next item. All right, thank you so
All right,
much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is citizens to be heard. This item is for matters not on the agenda or on the agenda. If you have anything in the audience that you'd like to speak about, please step up to the microphone and state your name and address. Seeing none today, we will move on to the consent agenda. Does anyone need a break?
Yeah.
Do you? Okay. Does anyone, we'll take a 5-minute break and be back by 9:30.